The clinking of champagne flutes at my sister's engagement dinner usually signified her latest triumph, but that night, the celebratory sound became the death knell for her perfect life. The clinking of champagne flutes sounded like a death knell in my ears. I was sitting in the plushest restaurant I'd ever set foot in, a place where the waiters moved like ghosts and the water cost more than my electric bill. And across the table, my sister, Clara, was glowing. Not just from the ambient lighting or the ridiculously large diamond on her finger, but from a lifetime of effortless victory. This was her engagement dinner, her moment, and as always, I was just a background character in the movie of her perfect life. You have to understand my relationship with Clara. To our parents, she was the sun, and I was a distant, slightly disappointing moon. She went to an Ivy League school, got a high-powered marketing job at a top tech firm, and was now engaged to the firm's CEO, Liam. Me? I dropped out of a state college to pursue my passion. I own a small, independent bakery. I make custom cakes and pastries. I love what I do, but in my family's eyes, I'm the one who settled. Clara never missed an opportunity to remind me of it. Her fiancé, Liam, seemed nice enough. He was sharp, impeccably dressed, and had a calm, observant way about him. He had greeted me with a firm handshake and a warm smile, asking genuine questions about my bakery. For a fleeting, hopeful moment, I thought maybe things would be different. Maybe having someone like Liam around would temper Clara's cruel streak. I should have known better. The dinner started with a round of toasts. My father stood up, his voice thick with emotion, talking about his brilliant, successful daughter, and how she'd finally found a man who was her equal. He glanced at me for a split second, a flicker of something pity maybe, before turning his adoring gaze back to Clara. I just smiled, took a sip of my ridiculously expensive champagne, and tried to numb the familiar sting. The main course arrived, and the conversation turned to wedding plans. Clara's mother-in-law-to-be, a poised and elegant woman named Eleanor, asked about the cake. "Oh, Clara, darling, have you thought about the cake? It must be a masterpiece for a wedding like this." A slow, malicious smile spread across Clara's face. It was the smile she always got right before she was about to land a blow. She cast a dramatic, pitying look in my direction. "Oh, we've thought about it," she said, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Some people have even suggested that my sister," she gestured vaguely at me with her fork, "could, do it." The table went quiet. All eyes turned to me. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. This was her game. Public humiliation disguised as a joke. "I mean, can you imagine?" Clara continued, letting out a tinkling, cruel laugh. "A cake from her little shop. It's all very cute, what she does, for children's birthday parties and bake sales. But my wedding? Liam's wedding?" She looked at him, expecting him to join in the mockery. "We need something sophisticated, elegant, not something that looks like it was decorated with a glue gun and a handful of sprinkles by someone who smells perpetually of burnt sugar." My hands were clenched into fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. I tried to keep my expression neutral, to not give her the satisfaction of seeing how much her words cut. My parents were chuckling awkwardly, as if it were a hilarious family joke they were all in on. Liam hadn't laughed. He had been watching the entire exchange with an unreadable expression. He slowly placed his knife and fork down on his plate, the silver making a soft, deliberate clink against the porcelain. Clara, oblivious, was still on her roll. Bless her heart. She tries so hard with her little hobby. I just don't want my wedding photos to be ruined by a lopsided 5-tier disaster. Some things are best left to the professionals, don't you think? She looked around the table, beaming, soaking in the attention. She was the star of the show, and I was her favorite punchline. I opened my mouth to say something, anything to defend myself, but no words came out. My throat felt tight, my eyes starting to burn. I just wanted to disappear. Then, a voice cut through the air, calm and cold as ice. It was Liam. He hadn't raised his voice, but it silenced the entire table instantly. Everyone, including Clara, froze and stared at him. The warm, charming fiancé from the beginning of the dinner was gone. In his place was a CEO, a man who commanded boardrooms and made billion-dollar decisions. His eyes, which had been so kind earlier, were now fixed on Clara with a chilling intensity. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Clara," he said, his voice dangerously low, "tell me more about what you consider professional." The silence was so thick you could have sliced it with a butter knife. Clara's perfect smile faltered, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. She let out a strained little laugh, trying to reclaim control of the room. "Oh, Liam, darling, don't be so serious," she purred, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Professional? I mean someone with a reputation, a real business, not a hobby that pays for groceries." She glanced at me, a smirk playing on her lips, confident that she had steered the conversation back onto her intended track of belittling me. Liam didn't move. He didn't even look at her hand resting on his. He just kept his eyes locked on her, his expression hardening. "A real business," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You mean like the one your sister built from the ground up? With her own money, her own recipes, working 18-hour days? The one that has a 5-star rating and a 3-month waiting list for custom orders? That's what you call a hobby?" My jaw practically hit the table. How did he know that? I'd never mentioned the waiting list to Clara. I kept my successes quiet because I knew she'd only find a way to twist them into failures. Clara's smirk vanished completely, replaced by a look of genuine shock. How do you know that?" she stammered. "I did my research," Liam said simply. "Before I proposed to you, I wanted to know everything about your family, about the people who would become my family." His gaze flickered to me for a brief second, and for the first time, I saw not pity, but respect. He turned back to Clara. "Professionalism isn't about the price tag on your suit or the address of your office, Clara. It's about integrity. It's about how you treat people, especially people you perceive to have less power than you." My mother, sensing an impending catastrophe, jumped in. "Now, Liam, let's not make a mountain out of a molehill," she said with a frantic, placating smile. "It's just sisterly teasing. Clara has always been protective of her little sister, wanting the best for her." "Protective?" Liam echoed, a single humorless laugh escaping his lips. "Is that what you call this? Publicly mocking her life's work in front of her entire family and your parents? Tearing her down to make yourself feel superior?" He finally pulled his hand away from Clara's touch as if it were contaminated. "This isn't teasing. This is cruelty. It's a character flaw. And it's one I've been seeing more and more of lately." The blood drained from Clara's face. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm talking about the reports from your team," Liam said, his voice dropping back into that icy boardroom tone. "About how you take credit for your juniors' ideas, about how you belittle the administrative staff, about the intern who filed a complaint with HR because of your constant verbal harassment. A complaint you told me was just a misunderstanding from an overly sensitive millennial." The air was sucked out of the room. My parents stared, mouths agape. This was no longer about a wedding cake. This was an intervention, an execution. Our company's #1 value is respect, Liam continued, his voice resonating with absolute authority. It's the foundation of everything we build. It's not just a word on a poster in the break room. You tonight have shown a complete and utter lack of it. You've shown that you are willing to humiliate your own sister, your own flesh and blood, for a cheap laugh. If you can do that to her, you can do it to anyone. You are a liability to the culture I have spent a decade building. Clara looked like a cornered animal. Liam, please, she begged, tears welling in her eyes. This is our engagement dinner. You're embarrassing me. No, Liam said, his voice final. You embarrassed yourself, and you embarrassed me. He stood up, his tall frame seeming to loom over the entire table. He looked down at her, his face a mask of cold disappointment. This engagement is over. A collective gasp went through the room. My mother made a small, wounded noise, but Liam wasn't finished. He looked Clara dead in the eye. And since you seem to have such a difficult time understanding the meaning of professionalism, he said, his words precise and devastating, let me make it simple for you. You are fired. Your security pass has been deactivated. HR will have a severance package messengered to you in the morning. Do not come to the office on Monday. Silence. Complete deafening silence. The clinking of champagne glasses seemed like a memory from another lifetime. Clara just sat there, her face a grotesque canvas of shock, disbelief, and dawning horror. Her perfect life, her perfect career, her perfect fiancé all gone in the span of 30 seconds. She slowly turned her head, her tear-filled eyes, now burning with a white-hot rage, and locked them onto me. Her entire body trembled as she rose from her chair, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. You, she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper that carried across the silent restaurant. You did this. This is all your fault. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. All I could do was stare at her, at the raw, unhinged fury in her eyes. Me? How was this my fault? I hadn't said a word. I had just sat there and taken her abuse like I always did. The accusation was so absurd, so quintessentially Clara, that for a moment I was speechless. My fault? I finally managed to croak out, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, you, she shrieked, her carefully constructed facade of elegance completely shattering. You and your pathetic little sob story. You came here tonight looking all sad and mousy in your cheap dress, hoping for this. You wanted to poison him against me. My father shot up from his chair. Clara, that's enough, he boomed, his face beet red. Sit down. You're making a scene. No, she screamed back, rounding on him. I won't sit down. Don't you see? She's been jealous of me her entire life. She couldn't stand that I was happy, that I was successful, that I was marrying a man like Liam. So she played the victim, just like she always does. Liam's mother, Eleanor, who had been watching the entire spectacle with a horrified but stoic grace, finally spoke. Clara, dear, she said, her voice surprisingly firm, I think you've said quite enough. Your accusations are baseless and frankly quite ugly. But Clara was beyond reason. She was a whirlwind of rage, her accusations becoming more and more frantic. She gestured wildly at me. She probably told him lies about me. She probably went behind my back and fed him all this nonsense about me at work. This is what she does. She ruins things. Liam, who had remained standing, a silent, imposing statue, finally moved. He took a step towards Clara, not in a threatening way, but in a way that commanded her full attention. She told me nothing, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Everything I learned about your behavior at work came from my executive team and HR. Everything I learned about your character, I learned from watching you myself. Tonight was just the final, undeniable confirmation." He turned his gaze to me, and the coldness in his eyes softened for a moment. "I apologize," he said, and his sincerity was shocking. "I apologize that my engagement to your sister put you in this position. No one deserves to be treated that way, especially by family." His words, his validation, were like a balm on a wound that had been festering for years. Tears I hadn't even realized were forming pricked at the back of my eyes. Clara let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh of disbelief. "You're apologizing to her." She ripped the diamond ring from her finger, the one she had been flashing all night, and with a guttural scream of frustration, she hurled it across the table. It clattered against a bread plate before skittering to a stop near my water glass, the massive diamond catching the light like a fallen star. "There," she spat. "You want him so bad? You can have him. You can have all of it. I hope you two are miserable together." With that, she grabbed her designer clutch, turned on her heel, and stormed out of the restaurant, leaving a trail of stunned silence and shattered expectations in her wake. My mother burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. My father just stood there, looking old and defeated, staring at the empty space where his golden child had just been. The rest of the dinner was a blur. Liam handled everything with a quiet, efficient grace. He apologized profusely to his parents, settled the exorbitant bill, and ensured my parents got to their car safely. He seemed to operate on a different plane of existence, one where cataclysmic personal events were handled with the same calm logistics as a corporate merger. When it was just the two of us left at the table, amidst the wreckage of what was supposed to be a celebration, he finally sat down. The silence stretched between us, filled only by the distant murmur of other diners and the soft clinking of cutlery. I just stared at the abandoned engagement ring still sitting on the table. "I'm truly sorry about all of this," he said again, his voice weary. "I never intended for my personal life to detonate so publicly." "It's not your fault," I mumbled, finally finding my voice. She's always been like that." He nodded slowly, his eyes thoughtful. "I'm beginning to understand that." He looked at me, a question in his gaze. "What she said about you being jealous, is that true?" I flinched. The question was direct but not accusatory. He just seemed to want to understand. I thought about it for a long, honest moment. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I was never jealous of her success. I was jealous of how easy it was for her, how our parents looked at her. But I was never jealous of her. I wouldn't want her life." He seemed to accept that. We sat in silence for another minute before he spoke again, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more businesslike. "Listen, I know this is incredibly awkward, but I feel I owe you something more than an apology. You've been unfairly maligned. Your business has been insulted." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek, black business card. "I'm hosting the company's annual charity gala next month. It's our biggest event of the year. 500 guests, the city's elite." He slid the card across the table towards me. "I was impressed by the research I did on your bakery. Your designs are incredible. Innovative, artistic." He paused, his eyes meeting mine. "I want to offer you the contract for the entire dessert catering for the gala. The budget is, let's say, substantial, and I'll need a centerpiece cake. Something spectacular, something professional." I stared at the business card, then back at Liam. My mind was reeling. A contract for his company's gala? That wasn't just a job, it was a career-making opportunity. It was the kind of validation I had only dreamed of. But a part of me, the part that had been conditioned by years of Clara's cruelty, was immediately suspicious. Was this pity? A grand gesture to assuage his guilt over the disastrous dinner? Why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? He didn't hesitate. Because your work is excellent, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And because I believe in rewarding talent and integrity. I've seen your portfolio online. You deserve a bigger stage. This has nothing to do with Clara or what happened tonight. This is a business proposition, plain and simple. I need the best, and my research says that's you. His words cut through my insecurity. He wasn't offering a handout. He was offering a professional opportunity based on my merit. It was something my own family had never given me. I took a deep breath, the scent of expensive wine and ruined tiramisu still hanging in the air, and made a decision. I picked up his card. Okay, I said, my voice firmer now. I'll do it. The next month was the most intense, exhausting, and exhilarating period of my life. I met with Liam and his event planning team, presenting them with sketches and flavor profiles. They didn't treat me like a little sister with a hobby. They treated me like a valued professional. Liam, in particular, was incredibly supportive. He was decisive, respectful, and had an eye for detail that challenged me to push my creative boundaries. We fell into an easy professional rhythm, and I found myself looking forward to our meetings, which sometimes drifted from cake designs to conversations about our lives, our passions, and our ridiculously dysfunctional families. I was seeing the man Clara had lost, and I was beginning to understand just how much she had thrown away. The night of the gala was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. My team and I worked tirelessly, setting up an elaborate dessert buffet that was more art installation than food. The centerpiece was my masterpiece, a 5-foot-tall cake, sculpted to look like a cascade of shimmering, metallic flowers, each one handcrafted from sugar. It was the most ambitious thing I had ever created. When the doors opened and the guests began to stream in, their reactions were immediate and overwhelming. People were taking photos of the cake, of the dessert tables, their praise echoing around the grand ballroom. I stood off to the side, my apron hidden under a blazer, just watching. For the first time, I felt a sense of pride so profound it almost brought me to tears. Liam found me by the French doors overlooking the city. "They love it," he said, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "You're the talk of the party. I have 3 different CEOs asking for your card." "Thank you, Liam," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "for everything, for seeing something in me." "I just saw what was already there," he replied softly. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Your father and I are so proud of you. We saw photos online. We were wrong, sweetheart. We are so sorry." The words I had longed to hear for over a decade, finally delivered via text message. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. My life changed after that night. The gala contract led to a flood of corporate clients and high-profile commissions. I was able to hire more staff, expand my shop, and finally buy the commercial-grade oven I'd been dreaming of. I was no longer the family disappointment. I was a success story, all on my own terms. Liam and I kept in touch. Our professional relationship slowly blossomed into a friendship, built on a foundation of mutual respect. There was an undeniable spark between us, but we took things slow, allowing the wounds from his past relationship to heal. About 6 months after the gala, I heard through the family grapevine that Clara had taken a junior marketing position at a small firm in another state. She'd had to sell her condo and was apparently struggling. She never apologized to me. I don't think she ever will. But strangely, I found I didn't need her apology anymore. Her power over me was broken. Her validation was worthless. One evening, Liam and I were walking through a park after dinner. He stopped by a fountain and turned to me. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about that night at the restaurant." I tensed slightly. "Oh, yeah?" "Yeah, I think it was the luckiest night of my life," he said. "It was the night I dodged a bullet and found a diamond." He reached out and gently took my hand. Just not the one she threw across the table. And as I stood there, holding his hand, the sound of the city a distant hum, I finally understood. My sister hadn't mocked me at her engagement dinner. She had mocked me at the beginning of my own story. She thought she was kicking me when I was down, but she had actually, accidentally, kicked me onto the exact path I was always meant to be on. And for the first time, I looked towards my future, and it was a future I had built myself, sweet, strong, and sparkling with promise.